You're listening to Errol Parker and Clancy Overall, editors of the Batuta Advocate, on Desert Rock FM.
Well, welcome back to Desert Rock FM on the Batuta Advocate radio show with Clancy and Errol. Sitting out here in the Diamantina, it's dried out a little bit since the river went up over the last couple of weeks, and everyone up north are putting back in their fence posts. But we have a special guest today. He's doing a tour. He just did a corporate lunch down at the Batuta Leagues last night. He's been kind enough to come and visit us. 67 caps for the Wallabies. Captained them 10 times. Phil Kearns, thanks for joining us.
Terrific to be here, and it was a lovely feed at the Leagues Club. That fish straight from Menindee was terrific to have.
Yeah. Well, you don't get any flathead that's better than the stuff you get out of the Darling River.
Bit of dry ice.
How'd the Corpy go, with all those leagueies?
Yeah, no, we just talk some of the great qualities of rugby league, respectful to all. We embrace everyone in our game and in that rugby league game. I'm not sure a lot of them understood what I was saying, but because I used a couple of words with more than 3 or 4 syllables.
King's English.
And, and, no, we respect all our sports around here, regardless of what they are. But great fans of the 13-man code. I'm not sure they knew where the other 2 fit in the 15-man code.
Yeah, no, I read in the paper the other day that there were a couple of people who were upset that the Waratahs and the Reds, they played their game on the SCG just there a few days ago, and they destroyed the pitch apparently. And apparently they were lost as to why the leagueies and the aerial ping pong boys, they didn't tear up the pitch quite as bad, and they had to explain the concept that the 2 scrums are indeed different. Yeah,
we push in our scrums, and we've actually got some real big blokes. So the average scrum these days is around 900 kilos, which is a little bit more than the rugby league scrum, and their shoulders do actually meet, and they do actually push against each other. So it creates quite a bit of force. And a bit of turf that was laid 3 days earlier probably isn't going to cut it out there on the SCG. The key and the other thing about that game is you understand you're a long, long way from the ground when you're at the SCG.
You are, yeah.
Huge amount of distance. The only person in the commentary box who could see anything was Greg Clark, because he had his binoculars on. But Timmy Horan and I called most of it off the TV because we couldn't see who the players were. It's a long way away.
Now, that's one thing we want to talk to you about today, is about how, the game has gotten bigger and stronger, and the scrums are now, you may as well take a car out there and cut a few hoops, because the players are such specimens. You got to see both sides of that. You were in the amateur era where there'd be a lot of players kind of waking up and wringing out the piss before they even hit the paddock, and then obviously you got to see it go into where it is now, where there's people that look like David Pocock.
Yeah, and every jersey now is like is
painted on.
Yeah, it's painted on. They're skin tight. There is nothing to grab onto.
Yeah, there's not a lot of players around in any code that look like David Pocock. That's a special specimen, that one. But yeah, I was seen to be a pretty big bloke when I was playing, and I was playing weight was sort of been between 108 and 112 kilos. And my props were maybe a little bit heavier. Ewan McKenzie was a bit of a monster at 118 kilos. But now you got guys 125, 130 running around, and the second row is the same. There's plenty of 6'8"ers and 130, 140 kilo guys, which it's a little bit scary. One of the scariest was when wingers stopped being little white guys, and when Jonah Lomu came along,
I think the whole world was watching that.
And that was a bit scary when Jonah came along, and he was as big as a number 8 or second rower, and could run real quick and
handled. What they say? Built like a steakhouse, handled like a bistro.
Yeah, that was him, mate. He was impossible to stop. There's some great footage of my great mate Rod Kafer trying to tackle Jonah on a couple of occasions, because in one game, Kafe did pick Jonah up and sit him on his bum.
Yeah.
And the next time the two came together, that was in a trial game, and then when they two came together in the actual competition round, we have video footage of it at Fox Sports, where Cave does go backwards at least 8 metres to be sat on his backside. It's one of the great sights in world rugby, watching Jonah run, but even a better sight seeing Cave getting smashed.
Yeah. Now, you got to see the All Blacks go from like a national kind of pastime to a national machine as well on the other side of the ditch. Mind you, in that era, the Wallabies were doing a similar thing, and Australian sport was ripping and tearing across the board, from Rafter to you guys to, to the Australian cricket side. Like, we were having a great run. But New Zealand, obviously, all of their energy was channeled into the All Blacks, and you had to play them, a couple times a year, sometimes more. What was it like watching that?
I was lucky. I was played in a great team. I played the All Blacks 19 times and won 11. Yeah. So came out on the right side of the draw on that one. And so I was lucky to play in a great era with a great team. We have a couple of unfortunate things here, and they're called AFL and Rugby League.
Yep.
You can imagine the team that we could put together for the Wallabies if we didn't have those two codes and we all played rugby.
Buddy Franklin.
We'd be difficult to stop. That has been a hindrance to our rugby superiority. Mm-hmm. But we've punched above our weight for a long period of time. When you look at some of the European nations, like England have got more players in the world than anywhere else.
Yeah.
And they're becoming dominant. Mm-hmm. New Zealand just have one single focus, and it's, forget rugby league or soccer over there, and they're smart enough not to have AFL. Yeah. They've got a big advantage in that. The whole national psyche is pointed towards one team, which, being part of the All Blacks, would be a bit weird too, I reckon.
Yeah, it'd be a bit too culty, I think. It'd be women want to marry you, men want to be you kind of thing.
Yeah.
Which, of course, you guys had a little bit as well. You said 11 out of 19. That was pretty red hot.
You look at some of the teams I was lucky enough to play in, and you think about the backlines that we had. The 99 winning World Cup team backline, when you had Gregan, Larkham, Horan, Little, Roth, Tune and Burke.
Queenslanders
How do you not win? How do you not win? There were Queenslanders in the team. Yeah, it's hard not to win when you got a team like that.
Yeah, no, and it was also lucky too that when Chris Latham, when he decided that he'd like to pull down the socks and hop into Matt Burke's boots, he was more than an apt.
Yeah, and he was a New South Welshman that went up.
He was. He's from Narrabri.
Yeah, and you also you forget that we were captained by your good friend John Eales, as well at the time.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah, John Eales, another great Queenslander. Tell us a little bit more about where you're at now, post-playing, because obviously we look at you, you're looking fit, you're well-dressed, you're not a pokey rep or, you're not doing what a lot of ex-sportsmen do in this country. Is it funny that you kind of go into work with Tim Horan and you can't get away from these blokes, or...?
Yeah, Timmy's in funds management now. He's really moved upscale. He was in banking before that, so you can see what a dodgy character he is by being in those industries.
Yeah. There's a recent report into all that, I think.
Yeah, there was something. I'm not sure if it got out to Batuta. I'm sure it would have. There'd be some banking criminals out here for sure.
There are. There's lots of people who didn't put their name down on the census we had last year.
Yeah.
There were lots of people who decided it'd be better if the government didn't know that they were living out here in the Diamond Tennis Shire.
Yeah.
Well, Horan would be one of those for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure he would use opals as a form of currency if he could.
Cryptocurrency and opals, they're the two things that he uses.
I imagine the crypto is pretty big in the rugby union world right now. A lot of those young players. Kirtley bought that new Range Rover with crypto, didn't he?
I think that Kirtley got that new Range Rover through the most old-fashioned way that you can get one, just through a handshake and a
long lunch.
Yeah, that's it.
What other way is there?
So aside from doing your work with Fox Sports, you work in insurance now, and you've also got another side hustle as well, I'd imagine, where you're trying to raise some money for Olympic athletes who otherwise wouldn't be able to afford to go over and compete in these games.
Yeah, I've developed a little bit of a passion for actually trying to properly fund sport in Australia. Yep. And that passion grew out of a couple of things. But one, my daughter is a budding, she'd love to be an Olympian. She plays water polo. Mm-hmm. But when you see what drives athletes and drove me was seeing heroes in the Olympics. Landy, Elliott,
Yep.
You know, Raylene Boyle run and seeing
Jai Tarima.
Dry Chirima, yeah, you're bringing some names out there, and you know, so those legends, Dawn Fraser, and
Yep.
you know, they were the people that inspired a nation to get off their ass and do stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and so our funding has decreased dramatically. We won 58 medals in Sydney, and now we're down to 29 at Rio, and we'll continue going backwards unless we spend some coins. So I've been and seen Bill and Scott,
Yep.
and they've decided, it seems, to do not very much.
Yep.
You know, the issues around national pride, mental health, you know, the general health and well-being of our kids, et cetera, they seem to be secondary to buying submarines and planes.
Yeah, well, that was one thing
Yeah.
we spoke to Ian Healy late last year, and Healy was, as he pointed out, you can see it in India. You know, when they're winning in the cricket, you can see the entire nation's mood changes. It kind of lifts everyone, and that's what you're kind of talking about here. It's like if we need to actually make allowances for feeling these feelings that you get from seeing, you know, Phil Kearns go over and.
Well, I mean, the thing that kills me the most is that the Poms actually think they're a better sporting nation than us now.
Yeah,
How hard does that hit you?
yeah.
Yeah, because they're not.
No, well, if you go on medal count, they are.
Yeah.
and
I suppose. Well,
they spend a bucket load of money on sport, which we don't.
well, how much are we spending? Like, how much money is the government pouring into sport now?
The government spends $150 million on our 45 Olympic sports,
Right.
Which is 0.027% of the Australian budget. You know, even if we doubled it and took it to 0.054% of the Australian, it's not a huge amount of money. So there's lots of scope to do. And to put it in perspective, I know that one of the universities in the US spends $400 million a year. So that's one university in the US spending more than double what we spend here.
Probably with a stadium that could fit all of our stadiums in it.
Well, they hosted the 84 Olympics.
Yeah, right.
Is where their football ground is.
Oh, right. Atlanta.
Oh, right.
No,
that
LA.
LA, sorry.
Yeah.
Coliseum.
Right.
Well, as you were talking about earlier, how the government's more inclined to spend the money on objects of war, I'm just reading here that that an F-35 that we've bought, you know, they have a unit cost of almost $90 million US a piece. So basically, if we didn't buy just another one of those jet planes, we could probably win a lot more gold medals. You're saying.
Yeah, one plane which will probably delivered in 2036.
Yeah.
We could have one less,
That's going to keep us.
and that'll keep our medal tally a little bit higher.
But wouldn't you rather feel a bit more, you know, like we don't want to really be a weaker nation in terms of, you know, we do have this ominous threat from China and Indonesia and New Zealand.
Well, imagine if Papua New Guinea go rogue.
I know.
Which, you know, I think they're really...
Prime Minister's
they
11, we've
are
seen
starting to push into the western half of their island, into Irian Jaya. And I'm actually concerned that we could get another East Timor on our hands, that we could have another rogue state.
That's why we need a $90 million jet to take the rebels down.
That we need to drop a $250,000 guided bomb onto 6 people in the back of a Hilux in the highlands of PNG. I think that's a more pertinent use to our public funds.
I think you're right. The threat from Bathurst Island, Melville Island, if those people, you know, become armed.
Yep.
And of course, the submarines. What was it? $50 billion the other day for 7 submarines
Yeah. I'll just hop on
to
the
fight
Google
ISIS
now.
underwater.
$50 billion, which is as much as the previous Labor government was committed to spending on the NBN.
Yeah.
Imagine how many gold medals if we spent $50 billion on sport.
We'd win every medal.
We'd have
We'd have a team of Pococks. We'd have a team of Cameron Smiths and Cooper Cronks.
we'd have athletes with a little red light coming out of their eye, I think, with $50 billion.
Yeah, right. So, aside from the Olympics, the gold medal tallies, we've kind of dropped off as well in terms of our other sports. I mean, aside from the pajama cricket, I mean, we've really not got a world-beaten team. in men's, our ladies teams have won a lot of big titles and everything, but you rarely get media on that these days, wouldn't you?
Elia and Charlotte Caslick are really kind of paving the way in sevens, which I think has been great for rugby union. Bringing home gold medals from the Olympics. What are your thoughts on across the board outside of, not just Olympics? What do you think's going on with our non-domestic codes? Because our domestic codes, it's like the WWE. There's fireworks, everything's, there's scandals, there's all kinds of stuff going on. There's a lot of eyes on it. What about our national sides?
It is, the players certainly have a major part of it, but the players have to be part of an infrastructure that is also performing. And I think it's no secret the Queensland Rugby Union just announced they'd lost $1 million last year, and that's part of a bigger story. Australian rugby.
Is that on Carmichael or what?
Partly.
Yeah.
Carmichael Quaid and James Slipper, who are no longer playing for the Reds, but the Reds are still partially funding them. We're not making much money at Australian Rugby Union level either, but then you look at our cricket codes and the administration there haven't covered themselves in glory either.
No.
So, there are a number of sports where possibly rugby league may have had a pretty bad off-season as well. That is mostly player-driven rather than administration-driven.
Off-season
but
from hell.
Still, so right across the board and all those male codes, we're having some issues which the women's codes don't seem to be having.
And that's the question I want to get to. Do you think that's because a lot of them are still kind of in that amateur kind of twilight? Do you think that's a lot more get off your ass? For the women's codes right now, because you played where they're at right now. You were at, and the game was at.
Yeah.
Do you feel like there's a different attitude, different atmosphere?
Absolutely, and you can notice, and I've met a few of the Australian women's sevens girls a few times. They're terrific ambassadors. There's this sense that they're just playing because they want to play.
Yeah. There's no brand,
and there's no brand. Quaid or Kirtley or whatever, Israel or whatever, they're just there to play, and they're there particularly in the sevens.
You mentioned what you're kind of working on now. Does it kind of do you see red when you see the politicians going to these matches and showing their face and kind of harvesting political points off being in a bloody cricket match or a football match when you know that they've done close to fuck all to actually, get those results?
Well, and the Olympians and ex-Olympians are being asked every day by government to go with them and meet some world leader from Cuba or Afghanistan or wherever they are that might have a particular penchant for pole vaulting. So they'll ring up one of the pole vaulters and say, can you come to this meeting? And they're constantly getting asked to do that. But there's no favours in return from the government to the Olympics.
The rowers are handing out canapes for Gina Reinhardt.
But Gina's funding them so they can do that.
So Gina's funding the rowing and the swimming. She's chosen to fund sports that are kind of across the board equal gender-wise, which I imagine water polo is as well, the women's and the men's. That's Gina's kind of contribution, which is obviously greatly appreciated by the players who are having their rent paid and being put on allowances. What would be happening to the rowers right now if it wasn't for Gina Reinhardt?
Well, if I can put it into perspective with one athlete who did win gold, and that's Chloe Esposito, won gold and got not 1 cent from the federal government. Now she does get a little bit of money, but she lives in Belgium with her father, and that's where they train and compete over there in Europe. Her mother runs a swim school in Western Sydney. Her husband is back here and works, and they send money over so that they can train and compete and try and win. The government gives Chloe a little bit of money now, and claim her as their own, but they gave her nothing before she won that gold.
And you can't hit, you can't head out in the Olympics with a bit of oat milk across the front of your jersey, can you?
No, they don't allow that.
Yeah.
If only they did.
Yeah, Wentworthville RSL written across you.
We'd have a little bit of Goulburn Valley going on for the rowers again.
Yeah, I think you're allowed to have Batuta leagues or something like that across.
Well, the Batuta Dolphins is the league side, and of course the Batuta Porpoises are the rugby union side in town.
Yeah.
First saltwater porpoises in the Simpson Desert, but.
You said you spoke to Bill. I'd be interested to hear what Bill Shorten's idea of sport is, because he is famously not that into sport. He's more into telling people to go on strike. And,
Mind you, he has modelled his career off a famous Olympian,
yes,
Stephen Bradbury.
Yeah.
What to be fair to Bill, he actually got it more than Scott.
Yeah, right.
Bill got it, and what we've actually turned sport into these days is something that's only accessible to rich kids.
Yep.
And it costs about $10,000 to send your kid to a Junior World Championships, for example.
Right.
And I've had stories from athletes and from their parents saying that they sold the family car so they could send their kid overseas, and literally doing that sort of stuff. So it is something accessible to rich kids only, and Bill doesn't like that.
Yeah.
And neither do I. So what I asked both he and Scott for the same thing, as I asked them for $250 million a year rather than 150. So not a massive, ask.
Well, we've just done the maths on the aeroplanes and the submarines,
Yeah.
so in the scheme of things, not really.
Pretty
So,
small.
yeah,
And I
you're
asked for
asking him to go without 2 jet planes.
2 jet planes.
planes.
Well, actually, only one, because
One.
if we keep the 150,
True.
we only
Yeah.
need one more plane, and we're nearly there, or one less plane, we're almost there. And I asked for $3 billion for a future fund for sport, and that way we never have to go back to the government again and ask them for a coin. We can just live off the dividends of that, and hopefully grow that, and have something that's there for sport forever.
Yeah, if there's one group of people, I think that'd be probably the best at being at the helm of that fund. I'd probably feel more comfortable if they were a bunch of union boys.
Well, and to add to that, we've got a great ex-boxer named Johan Lind, and he was a super heavyweight, competed at the Olympics, and he works for New South Wales Treasury.
Right.
So I think he'd be a great bloke that could head, and he's, I've got to say, about 6'6", and I reckon I'd put him in 115 kilo.
Right.
So he'd be a great guy to guard that money.
Well, yeah, maybe with his hands.
Yeah. They do a better job than than the night watchman Morrison, of course. We need to ask across the board. What have you kind of seen? Like, are the stories that you mentioned that one before about the families having to sell the car?
Has there been like an Ian Thorpe who's had to, not go to the Olympics and, have to go and actually work?
Well, they never become famous because they can't go on and do it. But there are lots of stories. There's a female boxer I've just become aware of, and she's selling T-shirts on Facebook now to try and fuel her Olympic gold dream. There's a shooter who's ranked 4 in the world, an Australian trap shooter, and he was driving 7 hours to go to training, 3.5 hours each way. So instead of doing that, his family sold the family farm and bought a smaller one, so they had enough money to fund putting a range on the farm. So parents are going to extraordinary lengths to help their kids become athletes, and it's just not right.
Well, election coming up, the state election as well. So that is one thing we need to ask, though. People say when we were winning, we mentioned it earlier across cricket, tennis and rugby. Was there a lot more money coming in pre-Olympics?
Yeah.
That's the conspiracy that Australia wanted to look good on the world stage.
How much were we spending back then?
9 years ago, 2010, we were spending just on 200 million. On sport, and so
and
we've
that's
gone
a high
back,
watermark.
and we've gone. Yeah, that was a high watermark.
So,
well, we probably spent more in Sydney. I don't know what the number was back in before the Sydney Olympics, but it would have been more.
Yeah.
But it would have been, we had less travel and less expenses and those sort of things back then. But we spent $200 million, so we've gone backwards by a quarter. And there's a thing called inflation, so prices normally go up.
Yep.
So it's more expensive to compete. And if you're thinking about cyclists, the cost of a bike, or the rowers, the cost of rowing boats.
Everything's made of titanium
Like
nowadays,
everything's titanium.
Yeah.
Everything's gone up in price. The Paralympic athletes trying to campaign. I know that they've got some crowdfunding pages. There's one of the girls that's got a crowdfunding page. She needs $20,000 to buy a bike to compete in triathlon at the next Olympics.
Yeah.
So this is what they're trying to do. They're trying to scab around and put their hand out for some coins.
That's not their job. No one who needs to do that particularly good at it. They need, that needs to be provided for them. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
least to get some equipment. I was actually talking to Zali Stegel the other day, just to drop a name. And when she went to the Olympics, she had to pay for excess baggage to get her skis on board. So it's been going around for a while.
Now, that's something we do want to talk about. Your name was thrown in the ring as the possible Zali Stegel leading into the federal election.
I'm not a very good skier.
Killer.
Yeah, it was. I got 2 phone calls along the way saying, I hear you're running. I said, thanks for letting me know, because I didn't know I was running. But no, never a thought. Never a thought.
Do you live in the Warringah electorate?
I do live in the Warringah electorate. I do see the signs, the anti-Tony signs. They really don't like him in the area. It's going to be a tough battle for him.
Yeah, well, and also Zali sounds like one that would be in your corner.
She, I think she definitely supports the Olympic cause. There's nearly 300 athletes now that are supporting the cause and are behind me, and it's actually exciting for me to see people like Shelley Watts and Nana Mears and Herb Elliott and Dawn Fraser and Raylene Boyle. They're all emailed me and they said, we're behind you, we're with you, and they're my heroes.
Yeah. Let's just talk about the donor kind of setups and the philanthropy. In the rugby, there's been a lot of people over the years that throw their hands up to revolutionise the game with their own money. What are your thoughts on that? Twiggy Forrest, of course, there was a similar one when you were playing with Packer, with the, what was that called? The
World Rugby Corporation.
Rugby Corporation.
Yeah, that was in 95. One of
95, 96, yeah.
What do you think of these kind of hands-on kind of figures?
Yeah.
I think it's fantastic that they've got a passion for a game, and if they've got the coin, that they're willing to help. There's a thing called the Australian Sports Foundation, which they can make their donations tax deductible as well, and then direct them to whatever sport needs to be directed to. Twiggy's one's an interesting one. Australian rugby, Twiggy's saying we've got $50 million to spend. Geez, you'd be sidling alongside him and buying him a schooner, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
I mean, that's.
Are you so you're pro Twiggy in the scheme of things? I know the rugby world is divided.
I know that certainly where Rugby Australia's gone in recent years has kind of split people down the middle, and now you've got Twiggy over there in the West who is willing to put his money where his mouth is, and I just think it's probably good for the game, but in the same way, it's causing a lot of division.
Yeah, I'm not a fan, I've got to say, of the rugby idea up into, I think it's called rapid rugby that they're trying to get up. I'm not sure I'm a fan of that.
More of a purist.
Yeah, I'm more of a purist, and just I think
the T20 of rugby.
We got to, and I'm not sure that the Malaysians, Taiwanese, Vietnamese, etc., are really built for the 15-a-side game. 7-a-side game, different story.
And it took the Japanese a couple of decades. They weren't at that level when you were playing at all.
No, they were. It wasn't until they beat South Africa in the World Cup that they came to the fore.
The person who got the most out of that was Eddie Jones, really, wouldn't it?
Well, he ends up coaching England. I don't know how much money he's making coaching England, but he's making a bucket load.
So you say he'd be more than the Reds in the early 2000s? Or?
Yeah, slightly. Yeah.
Probably a little bit.
Well, maybe that's why the Reds are in financial trouble. Maybe they paid Eddie too much. Who knows?
They paid him Japan money. So what is the feeling? Do you think Twiggy's idea could work? Do you think Alice Springs could have a rugby team, professional?
Twiggy's idea, his passion is for Western Australia and to get Western Australia back into Australian rugby. And I think, there's got to be some sort of pathway that you can make. Mightn't be next year or the year after, but maybe if you create a 5 or 7 year plan to get WA back as part of Super Rugby, then I'm sure that it's got to be achievable. It's just too much of an enticing thing for a code to do is to miss out on that sort of money.
And look, the force over there in WA, it wasn't anything like the Suns in the AFL and the Gold Coast. They had a fan base, obviously South African Kiwi expat community that's existing in Perth. And you were on the ground. Did you see it? Was it a real fan base?
There's an everything community over there in WA, from the Welsh, the Irish, the Scots. They're all there. The South Africans, there heaps of Poms and South Africans, and they would fill that ground. Depending on who was playing, but certainly for a local derby or when they were playing the Crusaders, they'd filled that ground up. And so there was that passion there. It wasn't like the Western Reds Rugby League over there. They actually had people turning up to the game.
Adelaide Rams.
Playing it. And, no, it was good. And it's real and it's palpable, and they're a passionate community over there, and they feel, probably rightly, they weren't respected.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think that that the IRB has finally responded to Twiggy, and their sort of latest brainwave that they've come up with is this World League concept, where they've got basically the Six Nations, but they've included Italy, overlooked other sort of rugby big nations, like they've overlooked Georgians, they've overlooked a couple of other people, and Portugal too, and Spain and Russia too, from that
Kiribati,
Kiribati, but they've decided to form, like a Six Nations team in the Southern Hemisphere, but chosen to include a Northern Hemisphere team in Japan and only one Pacific island. And they've overlooked, Argentina, which has got like the fourth highest amount of rugby union players in the world. They've overlooked them, and they've always been a very competitive team. What are your feelings on this new World League?
Won't happen.
No?
No, not in the short term. It just will not happen in the short term. And there's also the added confusion now that one of the private equity firms is looking to buy half of the Six Nations tournament. And the Six Nations will make a lot more money out of that up north than they will out of having a World League.
If we could put all the levers in your hands for the next couple of years, what would you be your play? Is there a culture you would need to remove? Is there a...
Yeah, gee, I shouldn't say too much because I ran for the ARU job last time and missed out. So I've got to be very careful what I say. I nearly did have the levers. But certainly one of the biggest things and one of the growing strengths in our game is club rugby. Mm-hmm. And the return to the good times of club rugby is really important, and that's where I learnt to play footy. Mm-hmm. Was in the club having my head shoved up my arse by some cranky 38-year-old prop that was at the end of his career with bung knees.
Mm-hmm. Some copper down at Randwick.
It was some, and that was the way you learnt to play, and they taught you the game. And what we've done a lot over the past is break down that pathway. Of the recent past is break down that pathway. And now kids are going straight from year 10 at school into some elite program where they actually don't play footy anymore.
Yeah. Well, they actually have a viral YouTube video first. So
yes.
It goes from grade 10 to getting a knee injury playing for the Melbourne Rebels.
Well, how do you feel about what, people like Nick Fordham have sort of done with club rugby down there in Sydney? Is that a step in the right direction, to have it like... a carnival atmosphere with helicopters and fireworks and things like that?
It's I was at the Randwick East game last year, and there were about 8,000 down there for that game with terrific crowd. Ringer and Manly get regular crowds, and part of the thing behind that is tribalism. Yep. And you'd see it in the Queensland country towns when they're bashing each other up. That tribalism is fantastic. We had 20,000 at the grand final at North Sydney Oval, and people are seeing that tribalism in their local communities, and they want to be part of it. Yeah. And we've got to, as a code, we've got to embrace that and figure out ways we can help through that grassroots focus.
So how come all of this tribalism and enthusiasm isn't trickling up? Like how come we haven't got that type of enthusiasm in the NRC, and indeed up into the state teams and into the national team?
No one gives a stuff about the NRC. To be completely frank,
did you say that when they announced it? Did you say that was what was going to happen? Because a lot of people were saying that.
Yeah, spending a lot of
energy for something that's not going to work? Was that the feeling?
No one cares too much about Canberra playing Queensland country. Yeah. Not a lot of tribe. They don't hate each other a lot, those two areas. Yeah. So there's not a lot around that. Tribalism's critical. It's why the AFL is so successful. They have a lot of tribalism involved in that. At Super Rugby level, there is tribalism amongst the Australian teams and to a degree certainly against the Kiwi teams. But I know I don't get up at 3 o'clock in the morning to watch the Waratahs play against the
Cheetahs.
Bulls or the Cheetahs or whatever it might be.
Or what's the Juarez.
The Jaguares.
Juarez.
Yeah, I know.
That's an expensive flight for that whole team too.
Yeah,
that's where a lot of money's going.
That's like 30 people in business class to Argentina. That's, Jesus, what's that? That's almost $250,000 in flights.
That's a lot of money.
It is.
And you got then you go to South Africa, and then you go up to Japan.
Yeah,
and
Argentina's one leg of a conference, right?
Yeah. Maybe everyone should start flying economy.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if you really care if the Jaguares beat the Sunwolves.
Yeah.
Oh, well,
I don't.
You don't know me very well.
Yeah.
I'm very well
For honour.
invested in that. I spent a lot of time in Japan as a boy.
There is quite a bit of tribalism between England and Argentina for previous reasons.
Yeah.
But
Thatcher.
I didn't know that Japan and Argentina ever went to war. I don't think so.
Yeah. We actually, I think they took a few of them in after the war.
Yeah.
But we actually were doing a corpy up in Brisbane around winter time last year and went down for a little look at South Annerley. And this was an accident that happened in the Queensland Club Rugby, was where Quade Cooper was being paid Wallabies money to turn up and play park football. And it revolutionised what was happening down there. There would have been, like you said, 5,000, 8,000 people down there watching Quade play, because he can play footy, and you can just rock up and if you're on the other side of the oval, bring your own Pierce. You know what I mean? So do you feel like that was probably the biggest crowd I'd seen in a football match, super or otherwise, in a long time? Do you feel like that kind of, the dribblers really need to be given a treat like that every now and then? Actually keep these guys down there for a week or two a season and have them associated with some sort of club?
Yeah, and a great way to come back from injuries. You play a couple of games for your club and you come back and people love it. They love seeing and having that close access and being able to walk on the field afterwards and shake hands with Quade. That's what people want to see, and that's what gets kids involved in the game. There was a great quote from a headmaster that I know. He said, "You cannot aspire to what you cannot see." So if you're a kid and you see Quade Cooper play, you want to be like Quade, and or whoever it is that you want to aspire to.
Well, Andrew Walker was playing down that comp about 5 years ago. He was still getting around too, playing Prems.
Yeah. Well, just one more question before we go, Phil. In the event that the Wallabies do go over to Japan at the end of this year, and we get flogged in the pool by Wales, Georgia, and Fiji, and the people are demanding that heads roll at Rugby Australia, will you be throwing your cap back in there?
Oh, geez, that's a loaded question. I'm not sure about that.
Tell us your deepest aspirations.
Yeah.
Well, you could give us, the Barnaby Joyce type answer and say, no, this is fine, and then...
No, I'm very happy with doing what I'm doing at the moment. So, no, I mean, I'm not a big believer that you should go back for a second bite at things, but you never know.
You never know.
Never know. Never say never.
No, it's more of a job for, for...
A younger man or woman. Back. No. Well, there is the fallacy in the game, or in most games, that the forwards are the dubbos, but in fact, the back line are more interested in having their hair look good and that sort of stuff.
Combing their hair
than any substance.
Well,
so if you want some substance, you get a front rower.
Yeah,
it sounds like a job for George Gregan then, because he's in between and got no hair. So we'll see how we go.
He also has the cologne of a back rower. So,
all right.
Thank you for joining us today, Phil.
It's been a pleasure being here in Batuta, and anytime you want me back, I'm here.
Yeah, we'll have to get you back to do the Porpoises Corpy in August.
Looking forward to it.
Righto.
The long lunch. No phones allowed.
Thank you. Yes, and thank you to Phil Kearns once again for joining us here in Koala Studios, here at Desert Rock FM. We're just coming up to the top of the hour here, so our time is almost up, Clancy.
Yes, thank you for joining us today, listeners. What a riveting interview that was, and it is interesting to see where Phil Kearns is at post-career. We obviously hear him commentating from time to time, but to see him sticking it to the Night Watchman and the incoming Prime Bradbury will be interesting to watch over the next couple of years as he, gets a bit of grassroots support for a bit of funding for our Olympians and other Australian sports representatives. And as the winter codes fire up, I'm sure we will be seeing a lot more of him. Thanks for listening. That's it for this week. I'm Clancy Overall. You be kind to each other.
And my name is Errol Parker. Stay out of the pokies. Never talk to cops. They're not your friends. They're out to ruin your life.